Yi Miao drives his car at a crazy speed, thinking about the girl he loved, the one who took the most precious thing he had. He will never forgive her. He heads straight toward Runing, who stands motionless, ready to be run over, as he takes his revenge with a satisfied heart. In a flashback, Runing was in a store selling musical instruments when she was drawn to the sound of a violin. She turned toward the source and saw Yilin playing calmly. She looked at him with admiration, remembering her childhood friend who used to play the same tune. She thought it was him. She tried to talk to him, but he left before she could. Later, Runing went to university and spoke to her friend Lu Hua, telling her that she had fallen in love with someone at first sight. But before she could finish her words, she discovered that Yilin was also in the same university and had joined the theater club. She smiled, realizing that she wouldn't let him escape again. However, Lu Hua told her that she also liked this guy and wouldn't give him up. The two girls argued, and when Lu Hua declared that she would confess her love to Yilin that very day, Runing impulsively stood up and shouted, "Hey, I love you." "But he doesn't love you." Runing turned toward the voice and found Yi Miao standing there, Yilin's brother. She remembered their first encounter, when she had been running away from a duck chasing her and had taken refuge behind Yi Miao, who was also afraid of ducks. She had hidden behind a door, leaving Yi Miao to be bitten by the duck. Ever since that day, he had hated her and sought revenge. Lu Hua told her that he was Yilin's brother, and Runing screamed in shock, unable to believe it. Meanwhile, Xingzhen was preparing for her theater audition. But as soon as she heard the commotion caused by Yi Miao and Runing, she became flustered and couldn't deliver her lines properly. The judges mocked her, and after the performance, the supervisor scolded her, saying that if she couldn't handle a little noise from her peers, how would she perform in front of a large audience? Or did she think she would succeed just because she wore expensive clothes? Xingzhen ran out of the theater, crying. On her way, she bumped into Yi Miao, and her dress got caught. He helped her free it and told her that crying in the middle of the road was dangerous. Then he walked away, leaving Xingzhen staring after him intently. At that moment, Runing was on a call with Lu Hua, telling her that she was waiting for Yilin to talk to him, but he still hadn't shown up. Lu Hua was sitting on a statue while talking to Runing, but suddenly, she screamed when she realized that the statue was actually a real guy. The call was cut off. Runing called out to her, but there was no response. Just then, she looked ahead and saw that Yilin had finally arrived. Runing pulls Yilin toward the wall and says, "Listen, even though I just learned your name today, I love you." Before he can respond, they hear Yi Miao's voice shouting from above, "Stay away from my brother, you evil witch." Runing runs toward the college's art studio, locks Yilin inside, and tells him, "I won't let you escape from me. I love you, and you are mine." At that moment, the vice dean is leading a group of parents on a tour of the campus. When they enter the studio, they find Runing and Yilin inside. Both of them look at their mothers, who are part of the group, in shock, fearing they will be misunderstood. The next day, the students join a training camp. Runing is excited about the opportunity to get closer to Yilin, but Yi Miao blocks her way and warns, "Just so you know, I won't let you trap my brother." Runing ignores him and gets on the bus. But before she can ask Yilin to sit beside her, Yi Miao quickly takes the seat. She yells, "That's Yilin's seat." But Yi Miao smirks and replies, "I told you, I won't allow it." After they arrive, the instructor asks each student why they decided to join the camp. When it's Runing's turn, she boldly says, "To get closer to Yilin." Even though the instructor scolds her, everyone is impressed by her confidence, except for Xingzhen, who clearly disapproves of Runing's actions. Later, the girls move into their dorms, and Runing discovers that her roommate is not Lu Hua, but Xingzhen. Xingzhen pulls out the dress she wore for her audition and says bitterly, "Why did you sell this dress to my mother at a cheap price, even though the supervisor told me it's very expensive? We are not beggars, and I don't need your pity." Runing remembers Xingzhen's mother, who works as a maid in their house. While helping Runing clean out her wardrobe, she had admired the dress. Wanting to avoid embarrassing her, Runing decided to sell it to her at a low price instead of giving it away for free. Runing replies, "I didn't know it was expensive. It was a gift, and I never meant to insult you or your mother." A little while later, Runing hears Lu Hua's loud voice. When she asks what's going on, Lu Hua says that the pervert who disguised himself as a statue at their college is here, and she wants revenge. Runing and Lu Hua head to his room and knock on the door. When Chenmu opens it, Lu Hua is stunned by how handsome he is and just stands there, staring. But Runing takes the initiative, pushes Lu Hua aside, and punches Chenmu, only for her fist to land on Yi Miao's face instead. He had been eating an apple and screams in pain along with Runing. Their friends rush them to the doctor. The doctor tells Yi Miao that, luckily, his teeth weren't broken. He removes the apple, but Yi Miao's mouth is injured. Yi Miao storms out angrily and shouts at Runing, telling her that from now on, she must stay away from him, or things will not end well for her. He leaves, but Lu Hua turns to Runing and asks, "What will you do if he tells Yilin what you did?" Runing responds that she will try to make amends with Yi Miao. The next day, Runing approaches Yi Miao and hands him an ointment for his injury. When Yi Miao yells at her, Yilin arrives and scolds him for shouting at such a sweet girl. He even points to Runing's swollen eyes, showing how much she cried out of regret. Yi Miao is stunned by how his little trickster managed to deceive his brother, who then tells him to stop bullying her. After Yilin leaves, Runing follows him and thanks him for standing up for her. Yilin smiles and tells her to reach out whenever she needs anything. Excited, Runing asks for his WeChat, and he agrees, leaving her overjoyed. Meanwhile, Yi Miao sits alone, wondering if he truly misjudged Runing. That's when Xingjin approaches him with a glass of water. He asks if Runing had really been crying all night, but Xingjin tells him the truth, Runing was lying. She had only used makeup to make her eyes look swollen. Yi Miao's anger flares up again. Now he knows that Runing really is an evil witch. He rushes to confront Runing, telling her that he found out about her lie and that she had faked her tears. But Runing just laughs playfully and tells him she won't let him ruin her image in front of Yilin. Runing then tells Yi Miao that she will take Yilin's bicycle to him herself. But before she can, Yi Miao jumps on it first. Not willing to give up, Runing hops on as well, refusing to let him have his way. Determined to get revenge, Yi Miao speeds up, intending to make her fall. But Runing quickly jumps off, causing Yi Miao to lose balance and crash the bike. Once again, Yi Miao finds himself at the doctor's office, this time with a head injury. Yilin arrives to pick them up. When he notices Yi Miao cursing at Runing, he tells him to stop bothering her because he has just found out that Runing is the daughter of their mother's friend. Yi Miao is forced to stay quiet. Meanwhile, Yilin starts talking to Runing about a particular painter, saying he wishes he could meet him. Runing smiles and tells him, "That painter is my uncle. I'll help you get an appointment with him." However, she asks Yi Miao to distract Xingjin because if she finds out Runing has left the camp, she will report her. Yilin forces Yi Miao to agree despite his reluctance to help Runing. As Runing starts gathering her things to leave, Xingjin notices and becomes suspicious. She decides to follow her but is surprised to find Yi Miao standing in front of her, tossing her an apple. He tells her that he wants to paint a portrait and needs a model, adding that he thinks there's no one better than her. Xingjin smiles and goes with him. Meanwhile, Runing walks beside Yilin, feeling happy and wishing she could get closer to him. Yilin suddenly stops and asks if she was truly worried about Xingjin or if she just wanted to keep Yi Miao away. Unable to deny it, Runing admits that she indeed wanted to keep Yi Miao away because he always gets between them. Yilin responds that it's impossible for him to let her go outside because she is a trainee, whereas he, as an older student and a leader, is allowed to leave. Runing then suggests that he should go while she simply jumps over the wall with ease. At that moment, Yi Miao is painting Xingjin, who, despite being tired, feels happy. When he finishes and shows her the painting, she tells him that she once knew a girl who used to draw her family members, and their portraits would be displayed everywhere. However, for the first time, she doesn't feel jealous because someone has finally painted her. Moved by her words, Yi Miao tears up the drawing and asks her to sit again so he can create a better one. This time, he pours his creativity into the new portrait. Lu Hua happens to pass by and sees the scene, finding it strange. She immediately calls Runing to tell her what she witnessed. But Runing does not answer because she is sitting with her uncle and Yilin, who is asking to become his apprentice. The painter agrees, provided that Yilin brings him a specific material needed for painting. Yilin and Runing leave together, but Yilin soon realizes that his bike tire needs more air, and there is no shop nearby. Runing offers to walk with him back to the camp, and Yilin thanks her for her help, calling her diligent and remarkable. Delighted by his compliment, Runing asks him to repeat his words while she records a video to cherish in front of her friends. At that moment, Lu Hua calls again and asks where she is. Runing tells her that she is with Yilin and happy that she managed to go out with him. Lu Hua then exclaims loudly, realizing that Yi Miao must have been distracting Xingjin by painting her. Shockingly, Xingjin and Yi Miao were standing behind them, overhearing everything. Xingjin is stunned. Yi Miao tries to explain, but she simply states that she knows how hard it is for anyone to refuse a request from Runing. Yi Miao insists that things aren't as they seem, but Xingjin assures him not to worry, she won't reveal their secret. Meanwhile, Yilin and Runing reach the wall. Yilin thanks her and apologizes if he had upset her, but Yi Miao, who was waiting for them at the top of the wall, interrupts and speaks on her behalf, saying that she is the one who keeps following him around all the time. Runing glares at him angrily, but before they can start arguing, Yilin steps in to stop them. Runing climbs the wall, but her pants tear. To avoid embarrassment in front of Yilin, she asks him to leave, assuring him that she will check on him later. Yilin leaves, but Yi Miao mocks her, saying that he heard the sound. Runing glares at him angrily and asks if he thinks Yilin heard it too. Yi Miao smirks and tells her that not only did Yilin hear it, but soon everyone will see. Feeling embarrassed, Runing lowers her gaze, but Yi Miao, despite his teasing, takes pity on her and hands her his coat to tie around her waist. The next day, Runing faints from lack of sleep. Yilin lifts her onto his back and carries her to the clinic. When she regains consciousness and finds him carrying her, she becomes excited again and tells him that she will be waiting for him at the studio to retrieve the material the painter requested. Later, Runing heads to the studio, retrieves the material for Yilin, and begins filtering it with him. However, Yi Miao accompanies them as usual, intent on keeping Runing away from his brother. After a while, Runing accidentally cuts her hand. As Yilin tries to help, Yi Miao places his hand over hers and sticks his tongue out playfully. Runing, fuming with anger, glares at him. That evening, Runing waits for Yilin so they can go to the painter together, but he calls to inform her that their leader has assigned them multiple tasks, making it impossible for him to go. However, she can take Yi Miao instead. Frustrated, Runing sighs but soon finds Yi Miao waiting for her. The two head to the painter. There, the painter is impressed by Yi Miao's exceptional skill in distinguishing painting materials and offers him an apprenticeship. Yi Miao immediately refuses and storms out. Runing follows him, trying to persuade him, but he tells her that he only wishes she would stay away from his brother, not that he wants to get close to her uncle. As they argue, they hear an elderly man calling for help. His grandson has fallen into the water. Without hesitation, Yi Miao rushes to assist. Meanwhile, Xingjin devises a plan to pretend to jump off rooftop in front of the supervisor to lure her into her room. When the supervisor enters, suspecting that Xingjin has escaped, she finds her inside, but Runing is nowhere to be found. At the same time, the youth supervisor realizes that Yi Miao is also missing. The commander, furious, yells at the group, but Yilin arrives just in time, informing him that both Yi Miao and Runing are present. The commander scolds them, but then receives a call confirming that they were seen helping an elderly man whose grandson had fallen into the water. Instead of punishing them, the commander forgives them and even praises their efforts, foiling Xingjin's scheme entirely. The next day, the commander honors both Yi Miao and Runing in front of the students after the elderly man arrives with a plaque to thank them. Shocked, the two stare in disbelief as Runing pushes Yi Miao forward, insisting that he was the one who jumped into the water. However, when the man hands them the plaque, laughter erupts among the students. It reads, "Thank you for saving my dog's picture." The commander's expression shifts to one of anger as he glares at Yi Miao and Runing, realizing that they had hidden the truth from him. He had believed they had performed a heroic act. Yi Miao, pulling Runing beside him, insists that she should stand with him, reminding her that she was the one who pushed him into helping the man. Runing retorts that she had no idea the man was talking about a photograph and not his grandson. As expected, the two start bickering once again. That evening, Yi Miao confronts Yilin, asking him why he tries so hard to be kind to Runing. Yilin remains silent, but Yi Miao smirks and accuses him. "It's because her mother and uncle are famous painters, and you're trying to get close to them, isn't it?" Yilin doesn't deny it. Meanwhile, Runing sits with her mother, telling her about her friend Yilin and requesting that she meet him, as he hopes to benefit from her expertise. Just then, Xingjin arrives, but Runing's mother asks her to wait, as she has something for her. A few moments later, she returns with a set of new clothes and hands them to Xingjin with warmth, telling her that she considers her a daughter and never wants her to feel embarrassed or left out. Later, Runing receives a call from Yilin, asking if she was able to arrange a meeting with her mother. She tells him that her mother has agreed and is expecting them. Soon, Yi Miao and Yilin arrive at the house, only to see Xingjin entering with grocery bags. Both are surprised and ask her what she's doing there. Embarrassed, Xingjin says nothing and quickly heads to her room, locking herself in for the rest of the day. As Yi Miao and Yilin walk inside, Yi Miao hears Runing playing a melody on the piano, the very same tune he used to play as a child with his childhood friend. He is stunned, unable to believe that Runing is the girl from his past. A small smile appears on his face, but just then Yilin enters. Runing glances at him nervously and, in her flustered state, trips and falls. Yilin smiles at her, while Yi Miao steps closer, smirking as he mocks, "You really embarrassed yourself in front of Yilin." Leaving them behind, Yilin enters Runing's mother's studio and presents her with a rare painting she had once mentioned wanting. However, upon examining it, she realizes that its colors have faded. Yilin reassures her not to worry, he has the necessary material to restore it, having acquired it from the painter earlier. At this time, Yimiao wanted to tell Runing that the tune she played right now is his own one. However, she stopped him, saying it's her first memory with Yilin. But he said it's his own tune, and he was that boy she met as kids. However, Runing thought he was kidding and doesn't believe him, which hurts Yimiao, but he decides not to talk further. Both of them went inside, and while Runing waited for Yilin to finish, Yimiao absent-mindedly started sketching her as she played. Lost in his thoughts, he suddenly snapped out of his trance, realizing what he was doing. Frustrated, he grabbed the drawing, threw it into the trash, and left immediately. Back at the dorm, Runing set her alarm for 7 in the morning, planning to join Yilin for his morning training. However, Xingjin discovered this and secretly turned off the alarm. The next morning, instead of Runing, Xingjin woke up early, got dressed, and hurried to the field to run with Yilin. Yilin was surprised to see her there, but she casually mentioned her presence, hinting at her connection to Runing's household. When Yilin fell silent, she admitted that her mother worked for Runing's family but explained that she was looking for a job to become independent and get her own place. Yilin admired her ambition and assured her that her mother's work was nothing to be ashamed of. Wishing her luck in finding a job, he then left. Meanwhile, Runing woke up late, unaware that she had overslept. In a rush, she brushed her teeth and tried to fix her hair, only to have it get stuck in the hair straightener. Unable to free it, she called Lu Hua, who was at the cafeteria talking to Chenmu. However, Lu Hua had her own predicament. Her head was stuck in the window, and everyone around her was laughing. Desperate not to miss her appointment, Runing called Yimiao, who was still asleep, and begged him to come quickly. Thinking she was in danger, he ran to the dormitory, only to find a bedsheet hanging down for him to climb. Despite his concern, he climbed up to her room and discovered her hair caught in the straightener. Unlike his usual self, he didn't complain and instead reached out to help her. Feeling flustered due to their closeness, Yimiao saw no other option but to cut her hair and dash out of the room. Runing screamed at him, but he quickly jumped out the window, landing painfully on his back. Despite the obvious pain, he reassured her that he was fine. Later, Runing learned about what had happened to her friend. She put on a hat and went to the cafeteria to fetch Lu Hua, but by then, it had started to rain. As the two girls stood there, Chenmu arrived with an umbrella and offered it to them. However, Lu Hua stepped away from Runing, claiming that she preferred walking in the rain, and suggested that Chenmu walk with her instead. Shocked by her friend's actions, Runing remained silent, understanding that Lu Hua was trying to get closer to Chenmu. Yimiao saw Runing standing in the rain and handed Yilin an umbrella, asking him to go to her. Yilin did as he was told, and Runing was overjoyed when he arrived. As he noticed her hair getting wet, he moved closer to tie it for her. At that moment, Runing suddenly remembered how close Yimiao had been to her that morning, causing her to feel nervous. Meanwhile, Yimiao deliberately kept his distance, knowing her feelings for his brother. Back at the dorm, Runing called Yimiao to thank him after learning from Yilin that the umbrella belonged to him. Yimiao felt uneasy upon receiving her call. However, before Runing could say much, Xingjin stormed in, yelling at her, demanding to know why she had used her bedsheet. Furious, she revealed that it contained money. Runing quickly apologized, insisting she had no idea. But Xingjin was not convinced and accused her of doing it on purpose to embarrass her because she hated her for being the daughter of a maid. Runing responded firmly, denying the accusation and telling Xingjin that if she had such a problem, she could simply ask her mother to resign and find another job instead of blaming her for something she hadn't done. Yimiao overheard the entire conversation and hung up, feeling a pang of sympathy for Xingjin. Meanwhile, as the rain continued to pour, Xingjin remained outside, searching under the window for the missing money. Runing offered to pay her back and asked her to come inside, but Xingjin glared at her angrily and ignored her offer. The next day, Xingjin sneezed repeatedly, having caught a cold from the rain. She headed to the cafeteria and ordered a small amount of food as she had little money left. She then bought a cup of instant noodles, carefully dividing it into 3 portions so she could have a small meal each night for dinner. That evening, Yilin received a call from Runing, asking about Yimiao. Yimiao, however, had been ignoring her calls in an effort to suppress his growing feelings for her. Yilin, sensing her determination, handed the phone to Yimiao. Runing told him that she needed to see him immediately to ask something about their childhood memories with Yilin. Meanwhile, Lu Hua arrived at the cafeteria and stared at the window where her head had been stuck before. Puzzled, she wondered how she had managed to get her head in but couldn't get it out, and in her curiosity, she attempted to fit her head in again. At that moment, Runing stood outside with Yimiao, looking at him seriously as she asked the question that had been on her mind for a while. She wanted to know which one of them, him or Yilin, had been her childhood love. Yi Miao tensed up, unsure how to respond. But before he could say a word, both of them were startled by the sound of Lu Hua's screams. They rushed into the cafeteria, searching for her, only to discover that she had already left with Chen Mu, who had broken the window to free her. Lu Hua's screams had not been out of distress but rather frustration over the broken window. By the time Yi Miao and Runing arrived at the cafeteria, they found it empty. As they turned to leave, they realized that the security guard had locked the building, trapping them inside. The two of them climbed up to the classroom window, calling out to the security guard, but he was too engrossed in his music to hear them. Seeing an opportunity, Runing decided to press Yi Miao for an answer. "Alright, tell me now, who was my childhood love?" she asked. Yi Miao could no longer resist her persistence. He pulled out an old drawing they had made together as children and admitted that he had been her childhood love. Runing felt a surge of happiness, but before she could react further, Yi Miao took the drawing and pinned it above the window. He told her that if it rained, the drawing would get wet, and he would only give it to her if she continued what she had started with Yilin. He reminded her that she couldn't just play with his feelings and leave after making him truly fall for her. Runing was stunned by his words. The next morning, Yi Miao woke up to find Runing pouring water over the drawing, ruining it completely. She told him that he couldn't threaten her and that she no longer believed he was the boy she once loved. In fact, she now despised him for what he had done. Yi Miao recalled his earlier conversation with Yilin, where he had confronted his brother about Runing mistaking him for her childhood love. Yilin had admitted that he genuinely liked Runing and that it didn't matter who she had loved in the past. They were grown up now, and he was willing to fight for her heart in the present. That was why Yilin had said what he did to Runing. A while later, Yi Miao headed to the basketball court to tell his brother that Runing truly despised him now. However, when he arrived, he saw Yilin playing and was suddenly invited into a match by another student. Yi Miao initially refused, but Yilin insisted. There was something unusual about Yilin's determination. He played with such seriousness, as if this match would decide who deserved Runing. The game began, and just as Yi Miao spotted Runing entering the court, he lost focus. Yilin seized the opportunity, swiftly taking the ball and scoring against him. Meanwhile, Xingzhen was being bullied by one of her classmates after he saw her eating leftover food from the cafeteria. He mockingly held out a handful of scraps and taunted her to eat them. Before she could respond, Yi Miao arrived, stopping the boy in his tracks. He asked where he thought leftover food belonged. When the student answered, "In the trash," Yi Miao smirked and told him, "Exactly. So you're going to eat all of this now?" Xingzhen, feeling pity for the boy despite everything, pleaded with Yi Miao to let him go. Yi Miao relented, allowing the bully to leave. Standing up, Yi Miao then turned to Xingzhen and told her he was inviting her to a proper meal. Xingzhen assumed he was mocking her like everyone else and accused him of doing the same. But Yi Miao stopped her, clarifying that he wasn't making fun of her. He simply wanted to invite her because she was his classmate. If it had been Runing in her position, he would have done the same. Without waiting for her reply, he grabbed her hand and led her to the cafeteria. At that moment, Runing sat with Yilin, intending to confess everything to him. However, Yilin surprised her by revealing that he already knew she had mistaken him for her childhood love. He told her that he rejected any feelings she had for him based on that misunderstanding, but also made it clear that he wouldn't give up on her, as he now genuinely loved her and wanted her to be his girlfriend. Runing felt tense, and just as she was about to refuse, Yilin asked her to take some time to think it over. Meanwhile, Xingzhen and Yi Miao left the cafeteria, and Yi Miao handed her his card so she could use it to buy food. Xingzhen spotted Runing nearby and immediately moved closer to Yi Miao. Seeing this, Runing was overcome with jealousy and stormed off, muttering to herself that Yi Miao was a despicable traitor. Later, Runing went to the library, where she caught sight of Yi Miao. She was about to leave when she suddenly stopped, questioning why she was avoiding him. Deciding to confront him, she turned back, only to find Yi Miao already standing there, waiting for her. He accused her of trying to run away, suggesting that she might be afraid of falling for him. Runing denied it and, in an attempt to prove him wrong, challenged him to retrieve a book from a high shelf. Yi Miao walked to the shelf but soon realized the book was too high for him to reach. Runing laughed at his struggle, teasing him for being short. Frustrated, Yi Miao decided to lift her up so she could grab the book herself, but as he did, he couldn't resist teasing her back by complaining about how heavy she was. Runing shrieked at him to put her down, but before the situation escalated, Xingzhen arrived with a ladder, dismissing their antics and reminding Yi Miao not to be late for their plans. Runing, noticing this exchange, asked where they were going, but Yi Miao did not respond. Later, Runing went to the art room to study, still irritated, while Yilin painted beside her. After some time, Yilin showed her a sketch of herself. Seeing the drawing, Runing felt a surge of happiness and found herself wishing that Yi Miao could be as gentle as his brother. As she admired the sketch, Yilin reached out to touch her hair, but Runing instinctively pulled away. Meanwhile, the student council gathered to select 2 students for the upcoming play. Observing the playful dynamic between Runing and Yi Miao, they decided to cast them as the leads. Although Runing immediately protested, deep down, she felt a sense of joy and later began practicing for the role in her room. Elsewhere, Yi Miao and Xingzhen were at the cafeteria, where she attempted to return his card. Yi Miao refused at first, but after her insistence, he eventually accepted it. Xingzhen then brought up the play, mentioning that since Runing didn't want the role, she should take it instead. She argued that she needed the extra credit for her performance and that Runing wouldn't have done well anyway. Yi Miao, however, stopped her from speaking negatively about Runing, pointing out that her refusal had nothing to do with her abilities. Realizing her mistake, Xingzhen apologized. Yi Miao then asked whether she truly needed the additional points, and Xingzhen admitted that she did. That evening, Runing was at the theater with Yilin when Lu Hua sent her a picture of Yi Miao and Xingzhen having a meal together. A wave of jealousy hit her, but when Yilin asked what was wrong, she simply replied that it was nothing. A few moments later, Xingzhen entered the theater, dressed as a male character. Yi Miao had given up his role so that she could take his place. Seeing this, Runing's jealousy grew stronger, but she resolved not to back down. During the audition, Runing had to sing a song, but her voice was so terrible that both the students and trainers couldn't help but laugh. Soon after, she was called into the trainer's room, where they told her she had to be replaced because of her poor singing. At that moment, Xingzhen stepped forward and volunteered to take the role. When the trainer reminded her that she was already cast as the lead, she glanced at Yi Miao and declared that the real lead was already there. The trainers agreed and officially assigned the main roles to Yi Miao and Xingzhen. Runing was consumed by a mix of jealousy and anger. As she stood there, Yi Miao approached her from behind, asking why she looked upset. Runing, still furious, turned to him and asked what he was doing and why he had done such a thing. Yi Miao reminded her that she had said she didn't want to participate in the play anyway. Runing clarified that it wasn't about the play but rather about how close he and Xingzhen had become lately. Yi Miao, sensing her frustration, asked why that bothered her. Runing, unwilling to admit the truth, said it was nothing but insisted that he should choose between one of them as a friend. In response, Yi Miao asked whether she would choose his friendship or Yilin's. Before she could answer, Xingzhen interrupted, calling Yi Miao over for rehearsal. The next day, during practice, Runing was assigned the role of a soldier who dies early in the war. She fell to the ground as part of the scene. Afterward, Xingzhen entered the stage for her performance, but as she moved forward, one of the wheels on her cart broke, causing her to fall. Yi Miao immediately rushed to her side to shield her. Runing, feeling a surge of concern, also ran toward Yi Miao. The others rushed to Xingzhen. When Runing reached her, she suddenly slapped her across the face, yelling that it was her fault. Yilin quickly stepped in to defend Runing, saying that she didn't do anything. But Runing turned to Yi Miao and demanded to know who was the last to leave the rehearsal room the previous night. When Yi Miao confirmed that it had been Runing and Xingzhen, Xingzhen screamed at Runing, asking if she was admitting to tampering with the cart. Runing, still furious, shouted that while she did feel jealous of Xingzhen for stealing her role, she would never do something so cruel. This was a crime. Xingzhen turned to Yi Miao, pleading with him to believe her, but he only looked at her with disgust before walking away to the hospital, his arm injured from the fall. At the hospital, Yilin sat beside Yi Miao, pointing out that only Runing, Xingzhen, and himself had been in the rehearsal room the previous night. He asked Yi Miao who he thought the culprit might be, but Yi Miao, unwavering in his conviction, simply replied that it could be anyone, except Runing. At that time, Runing searched for her mother at home but couldn't find her. She discovered a note stating that she had an important appointment. On the dining table, she noticed some food left behind, so she decided to take it with her to visit Yi Miao at the hospital. As soon as Yi Miao saw her, he mocked the puffiness under her eyes and her untidy clothes. She felt upset, having spent the entire night worrying about him without getting any sleep, but deep down, she was relieved that he was fine. She sat beside him and handed him the food. After taking a bite, he remarked that it had a strange but delicious taste and continued eating. Just then, Runing received a call from Xingzhen's mother, who mentioned that she had prepared a meal for her dog, but now it was missing. Runing froze in shock and glanced at Yi Miao, unable to confess the truth. When Yi Miao offered to share the food with her, she refused and left him to eat alone. Unbeknownst to them, Yi Miao's mother was watching from behind the door. Meanwhile, Runing's mother was at the school, confronting the principal and accusing him of being too lenient for placing blame on her daughter without any solid proof. The principal argued that Runing was the last person to leave the room, but her mother countered that this wasn't sufficient evidence. At that moment, the principal received a phone call from an important man who scolded him before abruptly ending the call. Frustrated, he turned to Runing's mother, shouting that if she had someone influential to solve the problem, she shouldn't have come herself. Without responding, Runing's mother left the office, only to be approached by a distinguished-looking man who revealed that he was the one who helped her. She looked at him in surprise, questioning his motives. Meanwhile, Xingzhen had been secretly watching the encounter and discreetly recorded the man, her curiosity about his identity growing. Later, as Runing was leaving the hospital, she found Yi Miao's mother waiting for her. The woman observed that Runing bore a strong resemblance to her mother and claimed to have known her for a long time. She went on to remark that it was clear Runing had not been taught proper manners. Confused, Runing asked why she was saying such things, only to hear accusations that she had tried to take revenge on the poor daughter of her mother's maid while playing with both Yi Miao's and Yilin's feelings, proving herself to be no different from her mother. Feeling deeply insulted, Runing defended herself, insisting that the incident with Xingzhen had nothing to do with her. As for Yi Miao and Yilin, they had been her childhood friends, and she had never manipulated either of them. She chose not to respond to the rest of the accusations, as her mother had taught her to be respectful toward elders. Still, as she walked away, she couldn't shake off the sting of humiliation, regretting that she had responded at all but unable to ignore the insult directed at her mother. Meanwhile, Yilin arrived at the theater, where he met Xingzhen. He explained that the cart she had been standing on was old and worn out, so it was only natural that it broke. However, Xingzhen refused to believe him, remaining convinced that Runing was behind it. She blamed Yilin for defending Runing and, as usual, played the role of the victim. When Xingzhen went to the coach, he informed her that Yi Miao had given up his lead role. Furious, she stormed over to Runing, shouting that she was responsible for Yi Miao's withdrawal and that she was constantly turning people against her. Runing attempted to call Yi Miao to prove that she had no knowledge of what Xingzhen was accusing her of, but Xingzhen refused to believe her. Losing her composure, Runing shouted at Xingzhen to stop, telling her she was exhausted from the constant hatred and the endless accusations of bullying. She confessed that their classmates' negative opinions of her, fueled by Xingzhen's victim act, had deeply hurt her. As Xingzhen raised her hand, Runing defiantly told her to slap her, just as she had done before. However, at that moment, Xingzhen's mother entered the room. Apologizing to Runing, she turned to her daughter and questioned why she harbored such resentment towards Runing, despite the fact that she treated her like her own daughter, providing for her food, clothing, and education. But Xingzhen, filled with bitterness, snapped back, telling her mother to stop defending Runing, calling her nothing but disgusting. In response, her mother slapped her, once again apologizing to Runing. Enraged, Xingzhen stormed out of the house, vowing revenge on Runing and swearing to take everything good from her life, starting with Yi Miao. The next day, Yi Miao repeatedly called Runing, but she never answered. It was revealed that Xingzhen had taken Runing's phone and thrown it into the forest. That night, Yi Miao fell asleep, only to wake up in the morning in distress, anxiously waiting for Runing's call, which never came. Meanwhile, Runing and her mother decided to leave for her uncle's house for a while, hoping that the time apart would allow Xingzhen to calm down. Xingzhen's mother thanked Runing's mother for her kindness and for choosing to leave the house, despite it rightfully being theirs. However, due to urgent work matters, Runing's mother had to stay behind, and Runing left for her uncle's house alone. At the university, Yi Miao grew worried when he realized that Runing hadn't shown up. He rushed to Lu Hua, who repeatedly tried calling Runing, but there was no response. Meanwhile, Yilin was rehearsing the play with Xingzhen, as Yi Miao had given up his role to him. Throughout the practice, Xingzhen deliberately kept stumbling, clearly trying to get Yi Miao's attention and draw him closer to her. Later, Yi Miao went to Runing's house, but it was Xingzhen's mother who answered the door. She informed him that Runing had gone to stay with her uncle for some time. Without hesitation, Yi Miao hurried to her uncle's house. When Runing opened the door, she was surprised to see him. Noticing her somber expression, Yi Miao immediately resorted to teasing her about her clothes. Just then, a duck appeared behind her. Yi Miao let out a terrified scream as the duck began chasing him around, forcing him to run in circles while Runing finally burst into laughter. After rehearsals, Xingzhen approached Yilin and pointed out that he had seemed distracted, assuming he had been thinking about Runing. She told him that she understood how he felt, reminding him that he hadn't loved Runing at first and had only gone along with her because she confessed to him. Yet, by the time he had truly fallen for her, he had discovered that she had been in love with his brother from the very beginning. Encouraging him, she urged him not to sit idly by and insisted that he should do whatever it took to win Runing back. At that moment, Runing was laughing at Yi Miao after her uncle had forced him to wear extra layers of heavy clothing, just like Runing. She complained that her uncle had made her wear too many pieces, but he simply replied that the weather was cold. Yi Miao then asked if he could at least remove a few layers, but the uncle firmly insisted that no one would take anything off. Later, everyone sat down for dinner, and Yi Miao immediately complained about the meal, noting that it lacked any source of protein. However, Runing told him to eat without complaining. With the first bite, Yi Miao was surprised by how delicious the food was, and soon enough, he finished his entire plate. That night, Runing woke up to Yi Miao shouting about the cold water, demanding warm water instead. Runing, amused, told him that they were in the countryside, not the city. There was no hot water here. Yi Miao reluctantly returned to his room, only to find the young boy, Momo, waiting for him, proudly announcing that he had warmed the bed for him. Yi Miao, puzzled, asked who he was and why he lived there. Momo explained that he was alone, without parents, but the uncle took care of him, and he considered him like a father. The next morning, as everyone gathered for breakfast, the uncle announced that since they would be spending their vacation there, they had to learn how to cook. Yi Miao immediately protested, saying that he couldn't cook, but the uncle told him that Runing would teach him. However, when Runing herself tried to cook, she burned the food completely. In a panic, she hid behind Yi Miao and quickly blamed him for burning the kitchen instead. Furious, the uncle chased Yi Miao around, threatening him as Runing laughed. Just then, a television producer entered the house and informed the uncle that he was working on a program about orphans. He wanted to feature the uncle in the show as an honorable man who was raising a poor child despite his own financial struggles. The producer then requested that they dress Momo in ragged clothes to gain public sympathy. However, the uncle refused outright, declaring that such an act would be an exploitation of Momo. The producer argued that he didn't have enough money to buy clothes for all 40 children participating in the program. At that moment, Runing stepped forward and declared that she would provide the clothes. The producer hesitated, mentioning that it would be expensive, but Runing confidently stated that she and her friend Yi Miao would cover the costs. Yi Miao, hearing this for the first time, was completely stunned by what she had just promised. Meanwhile, Yilin received shocking news. His father had returned to China without informing anyone. After numerous attempts to track him down, Yilin finally found him. However, to his utter disbelief, his father was with Runing's mother. It was then revealed that this was the same man Runing's mother had encountered at the school earlier. Yilin stood before them, utterly speechless, trying to understand the nature of their relationship. At the same time, Runing had taken Yi Miao to the market to buy the clothes they had promised. When Yi Miao picked up a piece of clothing in one of the shops, he immediately remarked on how cheap and low quality it looked. Alarmed, Runing quickly pulled him aside, apologizing profusely to the vendor. She reminded Yi Miao that he couldn't talk about people's merchandise that way. Just then, Runing's eyes caught sight of her uncle's beloved duck at one of the stalls. She rushed over and asked the seller where he had gotten it from, only to hear that someone had sold it to him. A wave of sadness washed over her, as she had always been very fond of that duck. On the other side, Yilin sat with his father and asked about his relationship with Runing's mother. His father explained that he had met her to discuss a business project. Yilin apologized for doubting him, but his father reassured him that his reaction was understandable. When Yilin inquired about the project, his father revealed that it was connected to a mistake he had made 20 years ago, one that he now needed to make amends for. Meanwhile, back at Runing's uncle's house, Yi Miao discovered that the uncle had sold the goose in order to buy clothes. Noticing Runing's sadness, Yi Miao immediately confronted the uncle, scolding him for his decision. He pointed out that the uncle possessed a rare stone he had once seen in a drawing, claiming that if sold, it would fetch a fortune. He accused the uncle of being stingy for selling the valuable goose while keeping the stone. However, the uncle remained silent. A short while later, Yi Miao returned, holding the goose in his arms, surprising Runing. When she asked why he had done this, he simply replied that he knew she loved the goose and wanted to make her happy. Later, as they were hanging up the newly bought clothes to dry, Runing turned to Yi Miao and said, "Don't you think you were too harsh with my uncle without knowing why he refuses to sell the stone?" Yi Miao, however, insisted that he hadn't been harsh at all. Runing then approached her uncle, asking him not to be upset with Yi Miao. But the uncle assured her that he wasn't angry. If anything, Yi Miao had been right. Runing, however, disagreed. The uncle then showed her the stone, explaining that while it held immense sentimental value for any artist, selling it would mean extracting the gold inside and discarding the rest, stripping it of its true worth. That was why he could never part with it. Later, Momo asked Yi Miao for help with his studies, but Yi Miao simply told him to go to Runing instead. Feeling frustrated by how Yi Miao always pushed responsibilities onto her, Runing sighed in exasperation. Seeking fresh air, she stepped outside, only to be confronted by a series of drawings depicting memories she had shared with both Yi Miao and Yilin. Tears welled up in her eyes, overwhelmed by nostalgia. At that moment, Yilin suddenly appeared in front of her and pulled her into an embrace. As she lifted her gaze, she caught sight of Yi Miao, who was watching them from a distance. The shock and heartbreak in his eyes were unmistakable, and in that instant, Runing broke down in tears. The following day, as the uncle bid farewell to Yi Miao, Runing, and Yilin, he handed Yi Miao a collection of reports detailing various types of dyes. He told him that one day, a time would come when Yi Miao would stubbornly hold onto what he loved, and only then would he truly understand the meaning behind the uncle's words. The next day, Runing returned to the university. As she was taking pictures with Lu Hua, Yilin appeared, watching her with sadness in his eyes. Meanwhile, Xingzhen approached Yi Miao while he was playing basketball and questioned him about why he had given up his role in the play. Yi Miao casually responded that his hand was still hurting. However, Xingzhen accused him of lying, pointing out that he was perfectly capable of playing basketball. She claimed that he had given up the role for Runing because he trusted her blindly. Yi Miao firmly replied that he did trust Runing and believed in her innocence. Nothing she said could shake his faith in her. Then, his tone darkened as he added, "I also know you slapped her. Consider this your warning. Don't ever do it again." Xingzhen's hatred for Runing grew even stronger. She then approached Yilin, who was still watching Runing from a distance. She told him to stop what he was doing because deep down, he knew Runing loved Yi Miao and would never love him. She called him that's third wheel in their relationship and taunted him, saying that if he truly wanted Runing, he would have to take her by force. Later, when Runing found out that Yi Miao had been playing basketball despite his injury, she rushed to the court and scolded him for being reckless. Yi Miao, grinning, asked playfully, "Are you worried about me?" Runing hesitated, flustered by his question. Suddenly, Yi Miao tilted his head and, without warning, kissed her. Shocked, Runing bolted from the scene in panic. Meanwhile, Yi Miao returned to his room, beaming with joy. He hugged and kissed everything around him, imagining they were Runing. Shortly after, the school principal praised Runing in front of everyone in the auditorium for donating clothes to orphan children. Runing quickly stood up and clarified that it had been a group effort, as Yi Miao had helped her as well. The students applauded, but whispers spread throughout the room, speculating that Runing and Yi Miao were dating. Later, Runing went to audition for the school play, only to be blocked by Xingzhen and a student council member. The girl coldly told Runing that after what she had done, she wasn't allowed to participate. She accused Runing of donating to the orphans just to improve her reputation among the students, saying that no one would be fooled. Runing firmly responded that helping orphans wasn't some great achievement, it was something anyone could do. Xingzhen scoffed. "Of course, it's easy for you to say that when you rely on your wealthy family's money. But can you even earn 100 yuan on your own?" Runing lifted her chin. "I can earn 1,000 yuan if I want to." Xingzhen smirked. "Fine. If you can make 1,000 yuan on your own, I'll let you slap me in return for the time I slapped you before." Runing, without hesitation, accepted the challenge. The next day, Yi Miao was out buying flowers for Runing when he suddenly spotted her standing in the street, grilling and selling skewered meat. Stunned, he walked up to her and asked what she was doing. Runing casually replied that she was working to earn the 1,000 yuan. Yi Miao sighed, about to walk away, but Runing grabbed his arm and forced him to help. With a defeated sigh, he set the flowers aside and joined her. Together, they began calling out to passers-by, trying to sell the skewers while Runing recorded a video to document the process. That evening, Runing discovered that the money was still not enough to reach 1,000 yuan, and both she and Yi Miao were exhausted from calling out to customers all day. However, an idea struck her. She suggested that they record their voices and play the audio to attract more people. Although Yi Miao initially refused, he eventually gave in. As they played the recording, customers returned, and after some time, Runing sat down to count the money once more. Tears welled up in her eyes, and Yi Miao, concerned, asked if they still hadn't reached the target. Instead of answering, she threw her arms around him and, with overwhelming joy, announced that they had finally succeeded. Filled with excitement, they both rushed off to attend the play. Upon arriving at the theater, Runing pulled out the voice recorder and proudly told Lu Hua that she had won the challenge using it. Lu Hua, curious, took the device but accidentally pressed play, causing their recorded voices to echo throughout the theater. Panic spread among Xingjun and her friends as they realized what had happened. In a desperate attempt to avoid embarrassment, they scrambled to hide under the seats. During the intermission, the judges discussed the poor performance of the lead actress and suggested replacing her. Yilin quickly intervened, explaining that his classmate Runing had already rehearsed for the role. However, one of Xingjun's friends objected, claiming that Runing had a terrible voice. In response, Yilin revealed that Xingjun had recorded herself singing, and they could simply use that for Runing's performance. The judges agreed, and Yilin immediately called Runing to inform her. Runing jumped up in excitement upon hearing the news. Yilin, now realizing that she and the others had been hiding under the seats, watched with amusement. The judges expressed their interest in giving her the role, and Runing gladly accepted, but only after insisting that they eat first. She then offered them the remaining grilled meat, winning them over with her kindness. Backstage, Yilin informed Xingjun that Runing had reclaimed the role, fueling Xingjun's frustration. Before she could react, Runing stepped forward, holding out the money, and confidently declared that she had won the bet. Xingjun, fuming, stared at her before sarcastically asking if she was now expecting to slap her in return. Lu Hua tried to stop Runing, but Runing ignored her and delivered the slap anyway. She then reminded Xingjun that she had shown her no mercy before, turning the students against her and making her look like a bully. Now, Runing vowed she would not be merciful either. Xingjun stormed off in tears, but before Runing could take the stage, Yimiao stopped her, reminding her to change into the character's costume first. Dressed for the role, Runing stepped onto the stage and delivered a performance that captivated the audience. As the final scene approached, Yilin performed the closing kiss, but instead of kissing her lips, he placed a gentle kiss on her forehead, not wanting to hurt his brother's feelings. After the play, Yimiao turned to Yilin and asked why he loved Runing. Yilin, in return, asked why Yimiao loved her, even though she wasn't his usual type. Then, Yilin revealed Runing had confessed her love to him first. However, Yimiao remained unfazed and confidently replied that she had meant him. He was her first love. Yilin cautioned him not to jump to conclusions, reminding him that Runing's final decision was still unknown. At that moment, Runing approached Yilin and asked to speak with him. He looked at her with sadness in his eyes, already anticipating what she was about to say. She confessed that she had actually loved Yimiao from the very beginning and apologized for the misunderstanding, assuring Yilin that he was a dear friend and like a brother to her. Yilin smiled softly, having known all along what Runing's decision would be. Later, as Yimiao sat in his room, he found himself thinking about Runing, wondering if she had completely left him behind. But then, a message from her appeared on his phone, making him smile despite everything. Runing turned to Yimiao and teasingly asked if he wasn't curious about what she had told Yilin. Yimiao simply replied that it didn't matter, so long as she was still talking to him, it meant she loved him. The next day, the two finally met, filled with both happiness and shyness, as they officially announced their relationship. To you guys who reached this moment, be ready, the coming is so tragic and this is warning. On the following day, Xingjun eavesdropped on a conversation between Runing's mother and Yimiao's father. Runing's mother mentioned that she was coming to meet him, which piqued Xingjun's interest, prompting her to follow. Meanwhile, Runing received a distressing phone call. Her father, who lived outside of China, had been diagnosed with cancer and was now in the hospital. Shocked by the news, she quickly called Yimiao to inform him that she wouldn't be able to meet him that day. At the same time, Xingjun reached her destination and watched as Runing's mother emerged from a building, followed closely by Yimiao's father, who attempted to embrace her in an effort to console her. However, she pushed him away, shouting at him in distress. Seizing the opportunity, Xingjun recorded the scene, feeling triumphant. Upon returning home, Xingjun showed Runing the video and sneered, declaring that Runing's mother was cheating on her father with Yimiao's father. She confidently stated that once this information was revealed, Runing and Yimiao's relationship would be over for good. Stunned, Runing could barely process what she was seeing. Xingjun, reveling in her scheme, smugly added that once Yimiao left Runing, he would be hers. When Runing questioned whether Xingjun actually loved Yimiao, Xingjun admitted it outright, declaring that she would steal him away since he would never accept Runing after she exposed her mother's infidelity. Tears streamed down Runing's face as she pleaded with Xingjun, telling her she could take revenge on her however she wanted, but why involve her mother? After all, Runing's mother had been financially supporting Xingjun. However, Xingjun scoffed, saying that Runing's mother was rich and a disgraceful woman who cheated on her husband while he was abroad. Perhaps he was cheating on her too. Unable to bear Xingjin's words any longer, Runing struck her, igniting a fierce fight between them. Their struggle only ended when Runing's mother arrived and, instead of scolding Xingjin, embraced her while reprimanding Runing for resorting to violence. Runing completely broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. She then talked with Xingjin, telling her that she'll break up with Yi Miao on condition that she didn't expose her mother, but reminds her that despite this, he can never fall for a girl like her. After a while, she finally told her mother about her father's condition and hesitantly asked if she still loved him. Her mother, overwhelmed with emotion, wept as she admitted that she loved him so much that she wished she could take his place. Runing cried even harder, struggling to hold herself together when her father called. She quickly composed herself before answering, trying to sound strong for him. Shortly afterward, she sent Yi Miao a message, asking to meet. Yi Miao arrived, his heart filled with excitement, but his joy quickly faded when Runing coldly told him that she wanted to break up. She claimed that she had never truly loved him, that she had only been getting revenge for what he had done to her in the past. Yi Miao was left in shock, unable to process her words before she walked away without giving him a chance to respond. Returning to campus, everything around Yi Miao seemed dull and lifeless. Even as Lu Hua mentioned that Runing was struggling with her studies due to her sadness, he remained silent. However, despite his pain, he quietly prepared a notebook filled with study notes for her. Handing it to Yilin, he asked him to deliver it to Runing, admitting that he would continue to love her, even if she no longer loved him. Yilin handed the notebook to Lu Hua, who then gave it to Runing. However, Runing refused to take it, stating that she didn't want it. Lu Hua, determined, told her that Yi Miao had prepared it for her, and if she truly didn't want it, she should return it to him herself. Reluctantly, Runing took the notebook and threw it into her drawer, unaware that Xingjin was watching closely, eager to find out what it contained. The next day, Yi Miao stole glances at Runing and noticed how she no longer smiled. She had lost weight, her features had become pale and weary, and he wished desperately to understand what had happened to her. Meanwhile, Xingjin secretly took the notebook and was surprised to find that it contained key points that could likely appear on upcoming exams. Seizing the opportunity, she sneaked into the exam hall and planted the notebook inside Runing's desk without anyone noticing. However, Yilin happened to witness what she did. The next morning, Yilin approached Runing and urged her to focus on her exam and not let anything distract her. Inside the exam hall, Xingjin kept glancing suspiciously at Runing's desk, deliberately trying to draw the proctor's attention to her. As expected, the proctor grew suspicious and proceeded to search Runing's desk, but he found nothing. Frustrated, Xingjin assumed that Runing had hidden the notebook in her clothes, so she continued casting glances at her, further fueling the proctor's doubts. He then demanded that Runing be searched. The students immediately objected, arguing that it was inappropriate for the proctor to physically search her. At that moment, Xingjin stood up and volunteered to search Runing herself. Runing, unfazed, asked what Xingjin was trying to prove. Xingjin accused her of being deceitful, claiming that she had tried to harm her before and was now undoubtedly cheating. At that moment, Yi Miao erupted in anger, yelling that Runing had never harmed Xingjin and calling her a liar. Without hesitation, Runing threw her coat in Xingjin's face and turned to the proctor, stating that she, too, wanted Xingjin to be searched. However, when she lifted her chair, she was met with an unexpected revelation. The very notebook Xingjin had planted was now under her own seat. Yilin had discreetly switched the notebooks. Xingjin stood in shock as the students turned against her, condemning her actions. She was immediately summoned to the dean's office, where he scolded her severely, accusing her of attempting to cheat and trying to deflect suspicion onto her classmate. He informed her that an official investigation would be opened against her within the university. That night, Xingjin, overwhelmed with humiliation and despair, decided to sleep in the basketball court. The next morning, she remembered the incriminating video of Runing's mother and realized that she still had one last card to play. However, Lu Hua entered the court and confronted her, warning that Runing had left the university and that if it was because of her, she would never forgive her. At the same time, Yi Miao learned of Runing's departure and rushed to Yilin, tears streaming down his face as he relayed the news. When Yi Miao demanded an explanation, Yilin silently handed him a message from Runing. In it, Runing had recounted everything that had happened. She explained that her family was the most important thing in her life and that she had chosen to be with them. As Yi Miao finished reading, he broke down in sorrow, questioning why Runing hadn't given him the choice to decide for himself. Why had she abandoned him so easily? Why had she chosen to run away instead of facing the situation? And above all, why hadn't she even said goodbye? At that moment, Runing was celebrating her father's birthday with her parents after he had finally returned to China. 2 years passed, and Runing was now working at a construction site. As she stepped outside, she found Yilin reaching out his hand to her. Delighted to see him, she asked how he had been. Yilin inquired about her life, and she told him that her father was recovering and that she was happy about it. However, Yilin's expression turned serious as he asked, "Why did you leave us so easily? And why didn't you even mention Yi Miao in your final messages?" Runing's face darkened with sadness, but she remained silent. At the same time, Xingzhen was in a car with Yi Miao's mother, who had taken full responsibility for her. The woman expressed her gratitude, thanking Xingzhen for revealing her husband's betrayal. As a result, she had not only taken care of Xingzhen but also given her a job. As they drove, Xingzhen caught sight of Runing and Yilin together through the window. Later that night, Runing stayed at a hotel since the construction site was far from home. She called her mother, who told her she was out shopping. However, as Runing turned, she was shocked to see her mother walking past her. Both women froze in place, stunned by the unexpected encounter. Runing quickly ran toward her mother's room, only to find Yi Miao's father inside. Runing collapsed into tears, screaming, "I gave up on Yi Miao for you and Dad. And yet, you're still betraying him, living with this man while he's in the hospital?" Yilin's father called him, and Yilin rushed to the scene, finding Runing in distress. He tried to comfort her, but she screamed at him, demanding, "Tell me, Yilin, why are they doing this?" Overwhelmed, Runing sprinted away, but as she ran, she heard her mother's voice calling after her. "Let me explain," her mother cried. Before Runing could turn around, she witnessed a horrifying sight, her mother falling from the balcony right before her eyes. Runing stood frozen in shock, unable to comprehend what had just happened. The sound of people screaming filled the air, but she refused to hear it. She ran, desperate to escape the nightmare, but Yilin chased after her. Just as a speeding car approached, Yilin pulled her out of the way, taking the full impact himself. He died instantly. Runing stared at him in disbelief, unable to process the reality of what had happened. Her vision blurred, and then everything went black. 2 days later, Runing awoke in a hospital room to find Lu Hua by her side. Struggling to make sense of everything, she asked what had happened. Before Lu Hua could answer, Yilin's mother stormed into the room in a frenzy. "It should have been you, not my son," she screamed. Only then did Runing fully grasp the weight of what had happened. Her mother was dead. Yilin was dead. Yi Miao entered the room, trying to calm his grieving mother, but her words struck deep. "Your mother died because of you. Never forget that." A short while later, the doctor entered and requested Runing's presence. Her father was dying. With her friends supporting her, she walked into the room, her body trembling. The doctor told her she only had a few moments left. As she reached her father's bedside, he took his final breath before she could even say a word. Runing stood there, paralyzed as the weight of everything crashed down on her. She had lost everything. Runing snapped out of her memories and looked at Yi Miao, who was speeding toward her in his car. She stared at him, her thoughts consumed by guilt. "Take revenge on me. I don't deserve to live. Even after all these years since the people I loved died, I still deserve to be punished." But at the last moment, Yi Miao slammed the brakes, stopping just before reaching her. He stood before her, his expression unreadable, yet his thoughts were in turmoil. "Why?" he asked himself. "Why can't I forgive you, even after all these years?" His eyes landed on the bag she carried, remembering what the maid had told him, that his family had summoned Runing for an important task. The secretary confirmed that Runing had arrived to restore a valuable painting from Yi Miao's mother's rare collection. As she was about to head to her assigned room, Yi Miao blocked her path. A pen slipped from her hair and fell to the ground. "You still have the courage to come here after all these years?" His voice was sharp, filled with resentment. "Do you feel no guilt at all? You never even apologized for what you did." But Runing was like a lifeless doll, her gaze vacant, her voice mechanical. "I'm here for work," she stated coldly. As she moved forward, Yi Miao's voice followed her. "Don't you want to see Yilin's room?" She hesitated for a moment but continued walking. Yi Miao's eyes fell on the pen that had fallen. It was the same one he had gifted her years ago. The next morning, Runing woke up and absent-mindedly placed a toothbrush in her hair instead of a pin. She informed the secretary that she was going out for a walk. The secretary offered to accompany her since she wasn't familiar with the area, but Runing refused. However, before she could leave, Yi Miao appeared behind her, snatched the toothbrush from her hair, and forcefully pulled her into his car. He drove her to the riverside and turned to her. "Why did you come back now, Runing?" Runing remained unfazed, her tone devoid of emotion. "I'm here for work. Restoring a landscape painting isn't easy. I came to study the scenery." With that, she got into the car and drove away, leaving Yimiao behind. Finally, alone, she allowed herself to cry, her body trembling as sorrow and regret consumed her. Later, Runing began reading the diary of the woman whose painting she was restoring, trying to piece together her past to complete the restoration properly. But many details were missing, leaving gaps in the story. With no other choice, she went to Yimiao, seeking answers. Yimiao told her that the woman had been an outcast, living in solitude because she had loved a man her family had rejected. In the end, she spent her final days in isolation before ultimately ending her life by jumping from a building. A sharp pain struck Runing's heart as she listened, her mind flashing back to memories of her mother's tragic fate. Unable to take any more, she asked Yimiao to stop. Yimiao, however, pulled out a bottle of antidepressants from his pocket, the ones Runing had been taking. He held them up and asked, "What is this?" Without hesitation, Runing replied, "I can't live without them." Yimiao's expression darkened. But the side effects? For the first time, Runing's cold mask cracked. Her voice rose with raw emotion. "If I stop taking them, I will die." Yimiao looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. He then asked, "Tell me, what did Yilin say to you before he died?" Runing's expression hardened once more. "I won't," she said firmly. "Everything that happened will stay with me. Even the guilt, I will carry it alone until the day I die." Yimiao feared that Runing might harm herself, so he called Lu Hua to understand what was happening. However, Lu Hua told him she knew nothing except that Runing had sold all her family's possessions and donated everything to the poor. Over the past years, she had suffered continuously, never finding a moment of relief. Meanwhile, Runing had retreated to her room, taking her antidepressants before falling asleep in tears. The next morning, Yimiao asked the secretary why Runing hadn't joined them for breakfast. The secretary informed him that she had eaten alone. Frustrated, Yimiao demanded, "What have we done for her to avoid us like this? I want you to stay by her side at all times. Don't leave her alone." At that moment, Runing stood on the balcony, lost in thought, remembering everything that had happened with them. Her heart ached with sorrow. Suddenly, Yimiao stormed in, grabbing her arm and shouting, "What are you doing, you fool? Stop feeling guilty. No one died because of you, understand?" But Runing simply replied that she had only stepped out to get some fresh air. Xingzhen entered then, announcing that she was there to discuss business. She had now become the head of Yimiao's father's company. Taking Runing to an expensive restaurant, she boasted about how her life had improved, how she had completed her studies abroad, and how Runing, on the other hand, had lost everything and become nothing. But Runing, with quiet confidence, told her that she had never felt more whole than when she had donated her wealth to charity. As for work, she was skilled enough that, despite everything, Yimiao's family personally chosen her to restore the painting. It was clear that Xingzhen still harbored feelings of inferiority, unable to shake the belief that Runing was above her. Trying to maintain her composure, Xingzhen offered to at least pay for Runing's meal at the expensive restaurant. But before she could, a waitress arrived and informed them that the bill had already been covered, as a gift from the restaurant owner. Xingzhen was taken aback, but Runing calmly told her, "Don't be surprised. It's me. I'm a partner in this restaurant with my father's friend." Xingzhen's resentment toward Runing deepened. Returning home, Runing heard a noise coming from Yilin's room and rushed toward it, only to find Yimiao blocking her path. He told her that it was his mother inside. When Runing entered, she found Yilin's mother in complete mental collapse, lost in a world of delusions. Xingzhen, seizing the moment to provoke Runing, smirked. "Look at what you've caused." But Yimiao quickly silenced her. Runing fled to her room, taking her antidepressants. Yimiao followed and for the first time, saw her tears. He offered her a glass of milk, but instead of drinking it, she clutched his hand and pleaded with him not to leave. Yimiao hesitated for a moment before moving closer, pulling her into an embrace to comfort her. As he held her, he finally admitted to himself, despite everything that had happened, he had never been able to hate her. Xingzhen watched them with hatred. As Yimiao stepped out, he warned her to stay away from Runing, declaring that this time, he would stop her. Xingzhen, filled with resentment, questioned why he still hated her after everything she had done for his mother, caring for her all these years. But Yimiao grabbed her face, his eyes burning with fury. "Don't forget," he said coldly. "You were the one who told my mother about my father's affair. You're the real devil here." Losing control, Xingzhen stormed off to find Runing, determined to play her final card. "I won't let you win, Runing," she said with a sinister smile. "Do you feel guilty? Let me make you feel even worse. Your mother didn't fall from the hotel balcony." Yimiao's mother pushed her. Runing stood frozen in shock as Xingzhen continued, her voice dripping with malice. That day, Yi Miao's mother and I arrived after I told her about her husband's betrayal. We overheard your mother pushing him away, telling him to stop chasing her. She reminded him that he had abandoned her for money and married another woman. She had moved on, she had a husband she loved, and she wanted nothing to do with him. But Yi Miao's father insisted that she was the only woman he had ever loved, that he had never forgotten her despite all the years apart. Upon hearing this, Yi Miao's mother lost control. She didn't even realize what she was doing until it was too late. She pushed your mother over the balcony. And after Yilin's death, she saw it as her punishment and lost her grip on reality. Runing, her hands trembling, pulled out a voice recorder. She had recorded every word Xingzhen had just said. Staring directly at her, she announced that she would hand over the recording to the police, ensuring they were all brought to justice. She ran outside, but Xingzhen chased after her, desperate to retrieve the recorder. The two women struggled as they reached the balcony. In the midst of the fight, Runing lost her balance and fell over the edge. At the last moment, Yi Miao caught her. Tears streamed down his face as he pleaded, "I love you. Please hold on to me. Let's forget everything that happened and start over. I can't live without you." Watching this scene, something shifted in Xingzhen. For the first time, she moved without selfish intent, reaching out and grabbing Runing's other hand, helping Yi Miao pull her back to safety. Later, Runing decided to take revenge on Yi Miao's mother, but not by turning her in. Instead, she went to the psychiatric hospital where the woman was confined. Standing before her, she simply said, "I know everything." Yi Miao's mother, her voice weak and broken, asked one thing. "Tell me, what were Yilin's last words to you before he died?" Runing refused. She would leave her drowning in guilt, a punishment worse than any prison sentence. In reality, Yilin's final words to Runing had been a plea. He had told her that his brother, Yi Miao, loved her deeply and had begged her never to leave him. He had given her a collection of paintings he had drawn, each capturing the moments they had shared together. He had asked her to treasure them always. In the final scene, Runing stood at the stadium where Yi Miao had kissed her for the first time. With sorrow in her voice, she whispered, "Despite all the darkness that surrounds me, you, Yi Miao, are the only light that still shines in my heart. I can forget everything that happened, but I can never forget you. You're the only person I've ever loved in my life." Behind her, Yi Miao appeared, holding a bouquet of white flowers. A soft smile played on his lips as he thought to himself that he was ready to embark on this painful journey with Runing, the journey he hoped would lead them to peace, love, and the life Yilin had wished for them both.